everybody, it's Romania Black, and yeah, it is time to talk about the second light novel of the Kuroko's Basketball Replace series, and I'll be honest, when I started the second novel, the first novel I had a lot of content to talk about. There were 5.5 chapters worth of things to talk about, and when I started up volume 2, I had been told by Truck that unfortunately chapters 3 and 5 of this volume does not have a translation in English, which is so frustrating. I remember back in the Discord months ago, Truck was trying to get somebody else to translate the other chapters, but it just wasn't working out. And I don't blame them because translation's hard anyway, and to try to translate like 40 pages worth of material, it's a lot, right? It is a lot. So I was like, yeah, it's okay. But it just baffles me that we have translations for chapters 1, 2, and 4, but not 3 and 5. So I don't know what to make of that. It's so weird, right? But after reading this second novel, that's not a problem. There's a lot to talk about. So I don't know how long this will be. I have no clue how long these discussions of the light novels will be, but there's a lot of content to go through, so I'm not worried. So hopefully you enjoy this, but I want to give a special shout out to Truck for putting these together, as well as for the reactors that we're going to talk about throughout that have done translations to make sure that us non-Japanese speaking or reading individuals can look at it. So we have Moko, obviously, Anime Manga Daisuke, we have them as well, and also translating the last chapter, if I find one here, is Rivka, Castle in the Sky translation. Yeah, so thank you guys so much. I really, really appreciate that. All of my love, so I can see these novels, because let me just say, Kuroko's Basketball, we've talked about this in the Discord quite a bit and in the comments, it's like an expanded universe. It's like a cinematic experience. You not only have the anime and the manga, but you have like nearly 100 songs, and you have all of these audio dramas, light novels. Like, it is a full-blown universe. And the thing that's so crazy about it that I'm discovering reading these light novels is that they're interwoven. The light novel that we're looking at today interweaves into other audio dramas that we've already looked at. And I was like, what? So it's kind of like, it's something I really appreciate, because a lot of times I don't want to get into like extra content with series, because a lot of times that extra content isn't canon and doesn't really bear any relevance to the canon series. But here, Kuroko's Basketball is kind of an exception. It does. It has relevance. It connects with the story and the characters. It's canon, so it gives you extra layers to them. It's really something awesome. And I, as someone that has often treated the side content as filler and not worth my time, it's given me this really good appreciation for what Kuroko's Basketball has given us. And there's so much of it. It's like, Daya is still my favorite. Ace of the Diamond is still my favorite sports anime. I wish Ace of the Diamond had as much star treatment in terms of content as this series does, because it's just insanity. So we need to talk about chapters 1, 2, and 4 of the second light novel. The cover of the light novel is really cool. It's just all of our Teiko boys all just walking down here, because of course I like that so far the trend with the light novels is we start out with a Teiko story, because why not? Why wouldn't we? And honestly, I was a little let down at first when I read Truck's translation note saying that this was based off of the Teiko Festival audio drama. And I was like, oh no. I was like, I've already watched that audio drama. And it's pretty long. It's like one of the hour ones. It's like the first theater games. I was like, that was a long audio drama. It's going to be all of the same. No, it is not. It is not the same. They do cover stuff that the audio drama talks about, but they fill in the gaps and give you all the details that you couldn't get from listening. They write out different things that happen that an audio experience could not capture. And I was so surprised and happy about it. And there's lots of, Kuroko's Basketball is like, we're going to give you all the ships. Hope you're ready. Oh my gosh, this chapter and chapter 2 sent me. Chapter 2 of this audio drama may be my favorite light novel chapter so far. It's, well, you'll find out why, because of the people it involves with. But so yeah, so we find out that Teiko holds their school festival during rainy season. It coincides with the founding of the school, and all I could think of was, oh, rain season. Yeah, like angst and tears and things that are tied with Teiko. Coincidence? No. I was like, of course they'd have their school festival like during rain season, so that as you're crying, your tears of angst, it'll wash with the rainwater, and you won't know the difference. Of course. But yeah, so we start out with Momoy running into Almine, who's hanging up a banner from the high school, and he's up in a tree. And Momoy gets onto him saying, "You're going to get hurt, and we've got to play a game soon." And Almine's like, "Nah, I'm fine." And what it reminded me of when they were climbing up to the top of the school at Toho, and Momoy like tries to cut him off, and he like jumps over her, and which is a dangerous move in itself. But it reminded me of that, like Almine just kind of putting himself in somewhat danger, but being in control of the situation, so it's okay. And so he ends up sliding down from the tree after he hangs the banner, and Momoy is like, she worries his hands are hurt because he's the ace and he has to handle the ball a lot, but he's fine. And Almine teases her that she cares more about the competition than she does him, and she counters, "Well, I am the manager." And then Almine gets awkward after that. So one thing about these light novels that I love that's being established is Momoy and Almine have the childhood friend, they're basically married trope like throughout, but Momoy tries to say that she loves Kuroko, and it's just, as to me, it's so apparent that her and Almine are in game. It's so apparent. But again, I don't judge anybody that loves Almine and Kuroko because I'm right there with you. And if you ship, Kuroko and Momoy, I'm not a big Kuroko Momoy shipper, but I get it. And she's like trying hardcore to push for it. And Kuroko's just a nice guy to her. He's just really sweet. He's just like, okay, sure. Like he's very nice. But Almine there's something about his dynamic with Momoy that I absolutely love. And it just feels like whenever he gets awkward around her, it just reads as he doesn't know how to process these feelings for her that he has. So he tries to like pass it off as something else, but then regrets it later, as we see in like when he had the argument with her back in the anime and back in the manga. So yeah, so Almine admits that he was lazing off during decorations in the festival. And it's pointed out several times in this chapter that Almine goes and like kind of lazes off and kind of like goes and he gets bored, and so he goes like to kind of be all by his own and kind of sit about and nap, which I thought was foreshadowing too for him skipping practice and taking a nap. The thing about it is, we've talked in the Discord and stuff about depression and, people in real life having depression, characters having depression. And it's something that, it's what I like that the series does with Kuroko's basketball is like Almine's depression. It wasn't something that was just brought on by Teiko and the whole thing. Like you see shades of it here. You see it was always kind of there, but basketball was something that brought him out of that depression. It was something that made him happy and gave him like purpose. And then the Teiko stuff came in, and then that sort of ruined it. So I appreciate that the series doesn't paint Almine as somebody that didn't have these tendencies before, because he did. They just weren't as exacerbated as they are after the whole Teiko incident. So I appreciate that. I'm glad that they point that out for us. Momoy proudly says that her group is doing crepes for the festival, and Almine is really excited until she says she's making the crepes, and he's like, never mind. And I love that Momoy, she complains about Almine's reaction to her best friend Azumi, who is in the first light novel. And I feel like Azumi at this point is just like, you guys are practically a couple. Can you not see that? Like, she constantly is there for Momoy to nag at, right, about her problems. And that's when Azumi brings up the Riddle Society rumor about couples that enter the marathon together are a pair if they win the end of the race. And Momoy doesn't want to admit that she wants to work with Kuroko, but she tells Azumi that she wants to make a crepe that's going to surprise Almine and prove that she can make one. And then she says to herself she wants to make a crepe that Kuroko will be able to try. So Momoy seems very torn throughout this chapter of, does she really like Kuroko? She's trying to convince herself she likes Kuroko, but then she still gets Almine involved. And I'm like, childhood friends or subconsciously something else? I do feel bad for Momoy, though. This chapter, I felt really bad for her. She tries to make the crepes. They are not good. And while they try to get her to be a waitress, so I'm like, well, yeah, let her be a waitress in the cafe. The uniform that they have, the white shirt vest and this tight black skirt, nobody has a uniform that will fit Momoy's proportions. And I was like, oh. So what they do is they just kick her out of the cafe and go tell her to do something else. And I felt bad for her. I was like, that sucks, because she wanted to be there to like show off to Kuroko and show off to Almine, and they just kick her out. And I was like, that's so mean. Like, I felt for Momoy a lot. So as she's leaving, she runs into Kuroko in the butler's outfit, like the audio drama, and she has this big blushing fangirl moment, and it's really funny, and Kuroko is oblivious, of course. But he asks if she wants to come to the cafe and eat the curry that his class is making. She thinks it's a date, but Kuroko's like, I'm just trying to make my class money. So he's like, will you come support my class? And she's like, it's a date. And he's like, not really. But she goes anyway. And after the curry, she convinces Kuroko to join her in the relay race together, just like in the audio drama. So what I do like is we get to visit Midorima's astrology reading. And it turns out the way they describe it in the light novel, it's basically he's just in a cubicle by himself waiting for people to come and get readings. He pulls out this like kerosene lamp and a conch shell, which will in the audio drama and this come back later. But the conch shell is just the lucky item for the day. I like that Momoi was expecting a crystal ball and tarot cards, but instead it's just a lamp. It's like Midorima's like, I'm not some cheap hoaxy fortune teller. And then as Midorima starts to read her fortune, he realizes that she's a Taurus and that on that day, Taurus and Cancers have the least compatibility. So he asks her to leave. It's so funny. I was like, no. He's just like, oh, you're a Taurus. No. And it just makes her go, which in the next audio drama or in the next light novel chapter, that will make more sense of why he's so adamant about her leaving. So I feel bad for Momoi. She's kicked out of the fortune telling. She stumbles past Akashi playing shogi with the others, like in the audio drama. He's not really mentioned anymore after that. And then she stumbles into Kisei, and who leads her to Murasaki Bara. Now, in the audio drama, I thought that Kisei was like in like a temple monk's garb. No, he's dressed up kind of like British royalty. It's very interesting. But then we see Murasaki Bara's dress that he's wearing because nobody had an outfit tall enough for him except a dress. And it literally makes him look like Marie Antoinette. He looks like Jezebel from Pokemon. He looks like Marie Antoinette. He has his hair all in these big curls and has like the corset and the dress. It's super cute. I love it. Murasaki Bara doesn't care. It also is really clever because the play that the class of Kisei and Murasaki Bara are doing is based on the French Revolution. And Murasaki Bara is like Marie Antoinette, the whole let them eat cake puns. I'm like, of course, because he's all into eating sweets. So it's really funny. I like that it's a shoujo take on the French Revolution of all things. It's weird, but I really like the creativity of it. And so during this time, Momoi runs into Almine and Kuroko, and I love that she ignores Almine and it just immediately goes up to Kuroko, and Almine is like, hey, what's the deal? And she's like, I only have eyes for Tetsu. And Tetsu feels already awkward about being drawn into. Apparently, Kuroko describes it as Almine and Momoi's everyday arguments. So apparently they argue every day about this, and Kuroko's like, I really don't want to get dragged in between you two. But he ends up being dragged in between them, who they're basically like a married couple in their banter. And they have to decide who's going to be paired up with whom, and that's when Kisei arrives to work with Almine because Kuroko's like, we're not going to work together well. So that part was very much like the audio drama, as is the next couple of parts. The three-legged race goes on for a couple pages, and it's exactly like the audio drama. There's not really anything special. They get to the audio visual room where they take the quiz, and the quiz gets explained in more detail. Almine does get impatient and aggravated that he's not getting quiz answers right. And we find out that because people were getting discouraged by the quiz or got left behind trying to figure out all the clues, that Kuroko and Momoi managed to squeeze in the top 10 going into the last leg of the race, which makes a lot of sense because they both are pretty smart, so that shouldn't surprise us. And so they go and they have to get the shell from Midorima, and it pretty much follows the audio drama from there. It established, though, one thing that is different from the audio drama, and there are elements of the audio dramas that are changed for the light novel chapters. And one here is that in the audio drama, Kisei and Almine needed to find something to advance to the next round. And here it's laid out very deliberately that it's a pretty girl. They're the heroes and they have to find the pretty girl. And so they grab Momoi as the person to get them to the next round, which I thought was really fun. I thought that was cute. I liked that. But yeah, so then we get to the last part of the race, which is the haunted house. These Japanese kids and their haunted houses, I tell you, we had one in the last volume and we have one here. The one cool thing, though, is as they're going through the haunted house, Kuroko and Momoi have this conversation, and they note how Murasaki Bara, when they were chasing Midorima, like in the audio drama, he called Momoi Sachin instead of Momochin, showing that they're getting closer together. And Momoi says that she wanted him to call her Satsuki or Momoi instead, but This works. She's just happy they're all closer together. She also notes that it's just Mura's way of communicating and that they're all different. And Kuroko kind of slams Midorima, being like, well, Midorima has too many rules. And I love that Momoi just kind of laughs at it. And they have this really, really cute moment. Like, everything's going really well for both of them. And then this part here took the cake for me. They're having a good time. They're chatting, having good chemistry. And then Momoi feels something slimy against her back, and she jumps. And when she jumps forward, she trips. And someone catches her, and she thinks that it's Kuroko. And she's like, oh, this romantic moment. What do I do? I'm going to look up and see Kuroko. And, like, how do I respond? No, Almine catches her. Because we find out Almine had this konjac, which is like this slimy, coldish Asian vegetable. He put it on her back, and she freaked out. And then when she tripped, he realized what happened and caught her. And it's so cute. I'm like, Momoi, I know you love Kuroko, and I don't blame you. I love Kuroko too. But Almine is right there. He's right there for you, girl. He is right there. He is catching you. He's paying attention to you. He's playing jokes on you. He's being funny. Girl, what do you want? And she gets mad and calls him a baka and runs off with Kuroko. And Almine's like, and he says it loud enough to where she can hear it. He's like, who knew she could be so cute when she's so ugly? And I'm like, Kisei's over here like, why are you antagonizing her? They're basically a married couple, and it's ridiculous. So, just like in the audio drama, the four almost make it to the end, but they get caught in a trap and they can't cross the finish line. They kind of add salt into the wound in this light novel chapter, because we see like the boy and girl team that wins the competition. As soon as they cross the finish line, he like confesses to her and she agrees and they fall in love, and Momoi's like, it should have been me. It was really funny. But yeah. And then we have the thing with the shoes, the LeBron James shoes that Kuroko lamented he wanted to get for Almine. And Almine says this thing that's really interesting. She says that it must be nice and that she's envious that they can just be boys and have friendship and worry for others. And I thought about that, and that it's such an interesting line, because it sort of makes it out to be like, well, why does it matter that they're boys if they can be friends and be worried for each other? But I was wondering if, a lot of people will say, watching Kuroko's basketball, that there are no ships. It's just, it's just subtext. It's not context. It's not real. And they just, they're just bros. They don't have romantic feelings for one another. And I feel like Momoi is kind of saying, like, she feels envious because Kuroko can say these things about Almine and be so close. And she's like, somebody could hear that and just think, wow, what a friend, what a best friend Kuroko is for Almine, and not misconstrue it for being something romantic. And maybe she thinks she can't say the same things out loud to either Kuroko or Almine without someone thinking that, she's making a confession. I feel like she feels that it sucks that she culturally can't say these things without them being misconstrued, but Kuroko can, and it's just them being friends. So I thought that was interesting. I don't know if that was a cultural thing or how, I feel like Japanese culture views romance and relationships a lot different than Western, especially American relationships. So it was a very curious line, but I really liked her pointing that out. And then the chapter ends with them going to the rooftop, the secret place that Kuroko has pointed out for the four of them, like in the audio drama. So that chapter was really good. I loved it. I thought it was a fun chapter. I'm glad that it added so much more from the audio drama, because going into it, I was really afraid it was going to be exactly the same. And I was like, oh my gosh, no. I was afraid I wasn't going to get much discussion out of it, that it would be the same, but that's not what happened. But my favorite is the second chapter by far. It may be my favorite chapter of all the light novels so far. I love it so much. I'm just fascinated with Midorima. I think I'm just fascinated with Midorima and who he is as a character. I think I'm just fascinated. Because the second chapter is called Midorima's Unlucky Day, translated by Anime Manga Daisuke. And we start out the second chapter with this very cryptic and symbolically enlightening passage about Midorima. And there's a lot of moments in this chapter that I couldn't take notes on. I wanted to read them verbatim to you because they were so well written and just absolutely hilarious. So this is how the chapter starts, with these paragraphs. Man proposes, God disposes. This means to assume a state of mind in which you do everything that is humanly possible and entrust the final outcome to fate. Furthermore, if you extrapolate upon this proverb, it can also be interpreted to mean, if you give your best effort, results will naturally follow. Midorima Shintaro, who maintains this proverb as his personal creed so that he will be chosen by fate, lives a systematic daily life based on extraordinary effort and superstition. He thereby does everything in his power to succeed. He is especially conscientious where superstition is concerned. In the morning, he always begins by putting his glasses on, using only his right hand. At night, after lying down on his futon once, he gets up, stretches, dons his nightcap, and goes to sleep. Midorima forces himself to follow this extreme, peculiar lifestyle. Yeah, so I love that what it says for Midorima. And then one morning in October, we have that Midorima wakes up, forgets that he forgot to take off his glasses that night. We get told that Midorima has trouble sleeping sometimes, and so to make himself go to sleep, he will stare up at the ceiling and count the grains of wood that are on the ceiling floor, which is interesting, and that he's a heavy sleeper and doesn't move. And they make note to say that Takao finds this weird, and Takao's always like, why don't you move when you sleep? Which suggests that they've, slept together before. And we find out like a sentence later that they shared a room at the summer training camp. I need fan fiction, please. I want fan fiction of them sharing a room at the summer training camp. I know it exists. If y'all want to share in the comments, please do. But yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, okay. So Midorima realizes he's late, which he rarely is. And when he gets off the futon, he trips and nearly hurts himself. And he believes that all of this bad luck has started because he didn't follow his morning ritual. So he decides if he just goes back from the start, gets back into bed, takes his glasses off, and treats everything like it normally is when he wakes up, he can reverse and restart the day. But then he realizes that before he goes to bed, he has to do the stretches again. So he does that, and then he thinks that everything is all fixed. He's like, I fixed it. We're back to the regular cycle, back to our regularly scheduled program. But then the narration tells us, quote, "But fate is always ready to impose unexpected trials upon us." Ridiculous, right? Ridiculous. I was like, what is happening? What is happening? So it's a day in October, and Midorima goes down to eat breakfast. His mother's downstairs. We don't get much with her, but we know that she's down there. And they have Oha Asa on the television. I'm so amazed that they know Midorima's going to want it on, so the TV is on. It is ready to go right when he gets there. And I love the wording of the way the novel does this next part. It says, up next, cancers. Cancer should take great care today. Midorima, who'd been eating his breakfast while ignoring the other horoscopes, suddenly fixed his eyes on the screen. Just the tension of it, right? You could experience some unexpected events today, so make sure to carry your lucky item with you at all times. Midorima focused on the television so as not to miss a single word. The lucky item for cancers is a red. And then this leads what I thought was into the audio drama about Midorima looking for a red thing, but we'll talk about that at the end of the chapter. No, what happens is, before he can find out what the red lucky item is, the television station has changed, and Midorima has a freak out moment. He's like, what is happening? You all know not to change my channel. Apparently no one ever changes the station when he goes down to get breakfast. Ever. So at that point, it made me wonder, and people have said this in the comments, as well as the Discord, talking about is Midorima possibly neurodivergent? Is Midorima possibly obsessive compulsive? Because it talks about having to do things in a specific order. It talks about how to focus on this. It felt like maybe he either has a neurodivergency or is possibly obsessive compulsive. But apparently the window to their garden, again, Midorima comes from a wealthy family, so they have a garden outside. The window to the garden was left open, and a black cat hops across the kitchen table and hit the remote, turning the station. Midorima lunges for the cat, but it dodges him, grabs the salmon off his plate from breakfast, and runs out the window. So Midorima says, this is why I hate cats, which is amazing. Amazing. So we get Midorima's thought process next on what he should do. And his thought process is either to look at Oha Asa's homepage, but we find out that homepage does not give results of the daily horoscopes. I'm like, the website doesn't post the daily horoscopes? So you basically, they're making you turn into the television station, tune in to find out, or you don't know. I'm like, what is the point of your homepage then, if you're not going to tell people the horoscopes? What is happening? but they won't do it. So then his next thing is he tries to think he might be able to guess the lucky item, but he points out that there is no pattern behind how the lucky items are chosen. So he's tried to figure it out. He's tried to crack the code before, but he's found nothing. And then he asks if he should ask someone, but he can't stand the thought about that idea, so he gives up. So instead, he just hurries to class, hoping that no bad luck hits him, and Takao notices once he gets there how nervous he is. And Midorima doesn't want to talk to Takao at first, and he thinks that Takao's making fun of him. But one thing I love about Takao is that in this chapter and in the manga, he has this really good way of transitioning from joking around to caring and being considerate. And Midorima finally kind of caves in after Takao's like, no, man, just tell me. And he explains that before he got to school, he was trying to squeeze by a truck. There was something about superstition that told him he had to go around it a certain way. And his bag for school got snagged on one of the fittings on the truck. And so the truck starts taking off, and Takao's like, why didn't the driver look behind and see you? And Midorima's like, I don't know. But the truck takes off with his bag, and so Midorima runs after it, and Takao's like, well, why didn't you yell for help? And he's like, I was in a residential area. I didn't want to wake anybody up. And Takao's like, really? So he manages to like track down the truck at a stop sign and grab his book. Then apparently the old woman next door to him where he stopped at accidentally sprayed him with water, offered to let him inside, but he declined and then fell down to a manhole cover. So Midorima's had a day. And just as Takao is asking why he has all of this bad luck happening, this female student in the class is walking by them, trips, and an entire vase of water and flowers lands on Midorima. And Takao's like, it is the horoscope. And so it is really ironic that the flower that lands on top of his head is a cosmos flower, which symbolizes peace and tranquility. Which is not what he's having right now. It's great. And so yeah, Midorima storms off. And when I tell you all the fangirling shipping moments these stories have, you can't write this. Because he storms off and Takao follows him. And Midorima thinks that Takao's just coming to annoy him. He's like, can't you just leave me alone? And Takao sighs and says, no, go ahead and change your clothes. Get your spare uniform. While you're doing that, I'm going to put your wet clothes in the laundry room. He's like, I'm going to do your laundry while you're getting changed. Come on, man. Couples vibes. Couples vibes, I tell you. I also wish that my school had had a laundry room, you bougie boys. But Midorima apparently keeps a spare uniform in school at all times, and it comes in handy just like today. So he goes and takes it. So Midorima has also carried to class a bag of accessories that are all from his mom and from her home. They're all red, and they reveal that he has been watching Oha Asa and has never missed hearing what the lucky item has been since he started watching. He says there were days where he was unable to acquire the lucky item, but he's never missed a day of not knowing what it was. And Takao's like, oh my God, you really are. The nice thing about it is Takao makes fun of him, sure. But Takao never makes fun of him for how he is. He makes fun of him just like to kind of tease him sometimes. But in the light novel, Takao never questions like statements like that and never thinks it's weird. He's very accepting and open with Midorima, which I really, really like. So Takao gets into his bag, and like a sweet cinnamon bun, he pulls out a red headband they took from his sister because he thought it was handy and comfortable. And he persuades Midorima to wear the red headband that was his sister's. And it's noted in the novel this is the first time he successfully persuaded Midorima. Note, they said the first time, not the first and the last. So he's going to persuade him again at some point, right? Right? So they figure out quickly that the red headband is not the lucky item, as in the next art class that they have, Midorima bumps into all of these sculptures they were going to draw and destroys them. So they were like, whoops. So Takao imitates, what I like is that he enlists the other members of Shutoku's team to try to help him with anything red that they have. And Otsuba brings this 6-foot scarf that he's knitted. It's a red scarf that he knitted himself. Takao imitates a fan of Otsuba giving him the scarf, thinking it was the gift from a fan, but it is important to note that the way Takao imitates is in the form of a male lover or a boyfriend, not a girlfriend, which I thought was interesting. Takao, I think, fully likes Midorima, for sure. And I think Midorima likes him, for sure. Like, I just thought that was funny that the novel seems to imply that he's playing like that he's imitating a gay fan of Otsuba. So, but I think Takao's totally fine with that, and Otsuba doesn't care, so it's all good. Otsuba said he made the scarf in home ec class when he was practicing knitting, and he found it peaceful, but he also says that he tends to go overboard, and so that's why it's 6 foot long. And then Takao just dies laughing because Midorima's like, well, it's a lucky item, maybe, and he just puts on the scarf, and it's really, really cute. So I love this exchange at the next scene that they have. It says, at lunchtime, Miyagi Kyoshi, which I think that Kyoshi Teppei and Miyagi Kyoshi, I'm like, are they related? But no, their names are switched. And Kimura Shinsuke are dropped by Midorima and Takao's classroom. Midorima, we heard you almost died, Miyagi said, sounding delighted. Midorima replied coolly, I'm alive, as you can see. It was a pretty close call, though, Takao corrected with a smirk as he leaned against the door frame. Midorima glared sidelong at him. It was a look that clearly said, you should have kept your mouth shut. Apparently, Midorima wore the scarf during gym class, and, quote, one of the guys on the other team stepped on the scarf, and Shin-chan went crashing to the ground. What's more, since the scarf was wrapped really tightly around his neck, he started choking to death. And Miyagi says, oh, serves you right. I mean, that must have been awful, Midorima. In response to Miyagi's hopefully insincere sentiment, Midorima's features twisted into a sour expression. I mean, the team gives him a lot of grief, and make a lot of jabs at him, but they do continue to try to help him. So, although I do question whether or not it's really a joke when it literally nearly kills him. Like Midorima nearly dies several times in this chapter, and I was like, maybe we shouldn't joke about that. But anyway, so to make matters worse, instead of grabbing his bento box from home, somehow Midorima was panicking and accidentally wrapped up a dictionary instead of the bento box, and he brings that instead. So not only is Midorima fighting for his life, but he doesn't get lunch. And his teammates are all kind of making fun of him, which is sad. But despite that, the team tries to help him, but nothing seems to work. So Midorima's like, I am going home. He's like, I'm not staying for practice. I'm not throwing off my form with bad luck. No. And Takao decides to go with him. And Midorima, he refutes at first and is like, no, don't you have things to do? And Takao says, it's too dangerous to let you go home alone. Couples goals. I mean, as if I didn't need to ship them enough. We then have this dialogue, and this is the dialogue that sold this chapter on me, this whole big section here. So Takao asks, what is it? What's wrong? And Midorima says, it feels strange to have you worrying about me. Midorima's expression was both angry and sulky. Takao looked at him in astonishment. Of course I'm worried. What am I supposed to do if you just up and die before Winter Cup? Midorima fell silent once more, and he fiddled with his glasses as if he was trying to hide something. Upon seeing this, a light bulb went off in Takao's head, and he was struck by a sudden realization. So it was on purpose that he smiled a broad, evil grin and said, well, that's my excuse. I might actually just want to see a few more of Shin-chan's amazing, amusing episodes, though. I figured as much. With that, Midorima finally resumed packing up to go home. And then Takao thinks this. Good grief, Takao thought to himself. What, your brain short circuits when you get embarrassed? When are you going to learn to be more honest with yourself? It seemed that being worried about his teammates made Midorima feel a bit uncomfortable. After collecting red items from his teammates throughout the day, he had finally realized they'd all gone to such lengths because they were worried about him. And now he was perplexed and unsure how to respond. Geez, our ace is a handful. A smile quirked at the corner of Takao's mouth, but he was careful to keep his expression hidden from Midorima while he sent the text to Otsubo to let him know they'd be absent from club activities. The writing, the Mido Taco writing, just, it lends itself. It writes itself. Like that whole, like Takao being like, come on, Midorima, admit that your teammates are caring about you. And I know that's a foreign feeling for you, but you like it. I was like, and Takao like walking him home, like being so sweet, like having this knowing look on his face. I was like, are you freaking kidding me? It was just, it sent me. I was like, oh my God, I was living for it. But yeah, so things don't go good for Midorima the rest of the day. He fell down the stairs and fell down the street 5 times. He collides with another person 4 times. One of those times, he bumped into someone making deliveries for a soba shop and ended up wearing a bowl of soba on his head. He was barked at by a dog 4 times. Almost ran over by a car twice. Splashed by someone watering a garden again. Brushed his hands against a freshly painted wall. And at a vending machine, he pressed the button for Oshiruko, but the machine dispensed a can of hot tomato juice instead. It's a pretty sucky afternoon for Midorima. Not good. And so Takao kind of teases him, being like, well, hey, you just keep getting all this bad luck to come at you. And Midorima's just not having it. What I like about this is there's also further evidence about Midorima possibly being either neurodivergent or having this obsessive compulsive trait, as he tells Takao exactly what was left behind that was read from the day. It says, in response, Midorima pushed his glasses on the bridge of his nose and said 10 pieces of stationery, 9 handmade objects, 3 articles of clothing, 5 foodstuffs, 12 everyday items, 2 ornaments, 6 toys, and 3 plants. 50 in all. When did you categorize all of that? Precision is required in order to accurately comprehend one's situation. So yeah, I mean, even if he's not neurodivergent, even if he's not obsessive compulsive, it's very apparent that Midorima has to be organized and in control of his life. Like, he has to have control and organization to get by. Otherwise, it's just spirals. And I'm like, huh. And the funny thing is, Takao is so chaotic. Takao just seems to, like, flow like a breeze, like a leaf in a breeze. Like, whatever happens, happens. So they make a really good balance for one another, where Takao's like, I don't care. Midorima's like, I'm constantly worried about being organized. It's really good, right? It's really good. But again, the Mido taco scenes, y'all, just, it's poetry. So then we cut to what I thought was the moment from the part-time job audio drama. Because I'm like, okay, they've gone to find the red item. They're going to see Kagami and Kuroko. But no. Instead, they just see a girl shouting with a red balloon. And at first, Takao notices her, and Midorima does not put 2 and 2 together that the balloon is red. He just sees the girl shouting, and Takao is like, we should probably go help her. And Midorima's like, no, children lose things all the time. And Takao lays a hand on his shoulder and says, what is it? He's like, Shin-chan, we should go help her. Why do I have to? What's wrong with doing a good deed? I refuse. I don't like children. Besides, why don't you do it? Oh man, I can't get serious with anybody under the age of 15. I like Takao's like, nah, I'm not into kids either. Again, I think that's fully saying that if Takao and Midorima get together, unless it's kidnapping that child from the 10th anniversary audio drama, they're not having kids because they don't like children. And then Midorima's like, come on. And Takao says, now Shin-chan, you have no problem just ignoring a crying girl? And Midorima just huffs and doesn't want to answer. And then I love this. It says, then Takao dealt the finishing blow. Besides, those balloons are red. What? Like, Midorima's like, wait, what? They're red? And so what's weird is I could have sworn that in the audio drama, Midorima helped out a girl who had lost her balloon and ends up getting saved by Kagami, and Kagami ends up being the lucky item. That's what I thought was going to happen in this chapter, but that's not what ends up happening. Instead, in this chapter, Kagami, doesn't save Midorima. Instead, Midorima grabs the girl in the balloons that she has right as this piece of the construction site is nearly demolished. And the girl tells him, he sees that they're okay, and he's like, wait, what's your sign? And she's like, oh, I'm a Cancer, and today's lucky item is a red balloon. And she gives Midorima one for saving her. And it's so bizarre, right? Because it hit me that either they changed the audio drama to this chapter because they didn't want to mention Kuroko and Kagami, or they didn't have space or room or whatever, or Midorima has been looking for a red lucky item more than once. And the audio drama stuff ends up happening later or before this or something like that, right? But I was really surprised that it changed it. It was very interesting, but it worked for me, right? So sadly, there's no translated chapters for chapters 3 or 5. The last chapter of the light novel is Toho Academy's Sleepless Night, that's translated by Rivka. It's a weird chapter. I feel like this book always has a weird chapter. Maybe it's the 4th chapter, because the 4th chapter in the last book was Teppei's chapter, and it was weird. I didn't care for it. Yeah, right? I think. But the Teppei chapter is my least favorite chapter of the first light novel. This one is probably my least favorite chapter of this one. Basically, Almine's not doing his homework. Essentially, it takes place right before the Winter Cup, right as winter's setting in. The team is picking starters for the Winter Cup, and Almine, of course, has disappeared. And Imayoshi calls Sakurai, Wakamatsu, and this third year named Susa over to his office, which is basically his single bed dorm room that is big enough for 4 people in it, like you do. But apparently he lives in the apartment dorms, the dormitory, or the academy's dormitory, and he lives in a single dorm, and Susa lives right next door to him. And so apparently Almine has either not done his assignments or has kind of half-assed them, and they need to be done to make sure that he can participate in the Winter Cup. But instead, it's kind of like the Shoyo and Kageyama issue with Haikyuu, where they had to go to remedial classes. No, Imiyoshi's like, Almine's not going to go to those. And he's like, Almine's probably not going to do this, so we need to do it for him. So he cons Sakurai, Wakamatsu, and Sasu in Susa into doing the work for him, into checking his answers and cleaning up where there's mistakes. And I'm like, Almine, my dude, really? But they agree to do it. And so they stay up all night correcting Almine's homework. It's interesting because Almine's revealed in some of his answers that he's kind of like a jokester, and Imiyoshi finds that amusing. And so it's one of those things where Almine's just bored with the assignment, so he kind of just half-asses it and moves on. But they stay up all night doing the homework while Imiyoshi is trying to trap Almine in his room to get him to do some work. Almine escapes Imiyoshi's room, and Imiyoshi's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know where he went, what to do with it. And that's why he had Sakurai and Wakamatsu help him to begin with. And they get everything done, and Sakurai reveals that he got done a little bit earlier than the other guys, so he snuck out to make them some breakfast. And they're so excited. And just as they're about to eat breakfast, Almine shows up. Apparently, when Almine escaped from Imiyoshi's room, he just climbed over into the next room, which was Susa's. Susa wasn't in the room because he was helping the others with Almine's homework. Almine just stayed in Susa's room all night and read NBA magazines. And then when he goes to meet up with Sakurai and the others, he's got the breakfast Sakurai made for all of them, and he's like, oh, this is really good, thanks, and eats it all. And I was like, no! So Almine basically did nothing but goof off, and they did all the work for him. And then he tells him away at the end. She's like, I'm so glad you got all your assignments turned in. And he's like, oh, it's a piece of cake. I was like, you jerk. So yeah, it was a really cute chapter, and I liked getting more into Sakurai's character and how Imiyoshi handles things. But of the three, it was probably my least favorite chapter. The best one is the Midorima one. The idea that Midorima could die from not getting his lucky items. The idea of Takao helping him find things. The idea of Takao being like the perfect match for him. It was so good. I was like, oh my gosh. And I was shipping the whole time reading it. I was fangirling. It was absolutely amazing. I know if you're in the Discord, I've pinned it. If you get a chance, all these novels are in the Discord. They are pinned. They're in the pinned section of the Kuroko's channel. So if you're on the Discord, shameless plug, for $1, you can read all of these. But yeah, you could definitely go check out this translation. I would highly recommend reading it. If you're a Midorima and Takao shipper, read that second chapter because it was so good. I was just sitting there like, I ate it up. I read it all last night, and I've been pacing myself trying to read like a chapter every couple days. But last night I just like powered through chapter 2. It was like, no, I wanted to read the whole thing. So it was a lot of fun, and I really, really enjoyed it. But yeah, so I didn't think I would have a lot to talk about with this second novel, but this video is nearly as long as my week 1. So for 3 chapters, there was a lot going on, and I was really surprised. Maybe it's a good thing there wasn't chapters 4 and 5. I don't know, but I was really surprised, and so I'm very happy that I got a chance to read that. So yeah. But I'm very curious to know your thoughts down below, what you guys thought of these chapters, if you had a chance to read the light novel yet. But I cannot wait for volume 3 now. Light novel 3, I'm ready. I can't wait to see what it has in store for us. So in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon to talk about volume 3 of the light novels for Kuroko's Basketball Replace. Bye!